Tonight we are in the book of Lamentations. So if you are, let's just refresh everybody's memory, right? Let's just do that. We ain't been together in a few weeks. We're hanging out together. So last year, beginning of the year, around this time, we decided to venture into the Bible in a nutshell. Yeah, big old nutshell. And so the plan was that we were going to hit the highlights of every book of the Bible, go through some key verses, give you the idea of what that book was about, kind of what God was doing through that book, and then we were going to take a whole year and make it from Genesis to Revelation. How'd we do? Let's take a man. I'm glad y'all ain't filling out like a survey on how do you you take a continuing ed class. They always give you a survey at the end of it. You have to fill out about how the class was. I'm not giving y'all a survey. So yeah, we were supposed to make it through the entire Bible in a year, and we made it. Did we make it through half? There's 66 books in the Bible. And we stopped on we were going chronologically. Remember that? We were going chronologically. So we didn't go in the order that the books are in your Bible. We went telling the whole story of from creation up until the point where we're at now. But going that way, we have covered 32 books of the Bible. 32. We've covered 32 out of 66. So you know what that tells me? That tells me we're going to do the Bible in a nutshell in 2 years. Not one. We're going to do it in 2 years. So we've got a few more books to finish out the Old Testament, and then we'll start in the New Testament sometime probably around the spring maybe. I don't know. Hopefully before July. Hopefully before summer. And then we'll go from there. So we started at creation. We met Abraham. We saw God's covenant with Abraham to provide a nation. I listened to a couple of different preachers, and I was listening to one here lately. Me and Bo's talked about this guy quite a bit. I ain't gonna tell you who he is, but me and Bo both will listen to him from time to time. I don't know if Bo likes him or not. I like him. I think he's pretty cool. And he's bald-headed, got a gray beard, and so it's like, hey man,
It's just nicer than yours.
It is nicer than mine.
Oh wow!
Thanks, buddy. I need to go to your barber. But this guy made a point the other day that I agreed with, and that I liked the way he put it. He said, we always talk about the children of Israel. We talk about them being God's chosen people. And I don't think that's the entire story. I think the entire story is that the children of Israel, the Abrahamic covenant, was so that they would be God's chosen people to bring salvation to the entire world. Because Jesus said he's come for the entire world. Paul said the great mystery of the Old Testament is that it was meant for, even though it's primarily about the Jewish race, it's meant for everybody. Salvation is what was coming out of that, and it was meant for everyone, Jews and Gentiles alike. There was no difference. And but yet we kind of think the Abrahamic people were God's chosen people, and then we stop right there. But they were God's chosen people to bring about the Messiah, Jesus, who would then be the one who brings about salvation for the entirety of the world, for all of mankind. And then now, as we are grafted in the vine, now that also includes us. That's our job, is not to bring about the Messiah now, but to bring about his message so that the whole world might be saved. And so we've covered how they went from Abraham to being in Egypt, and then how Moses came along, Moses led the people out, and then led them through the wilderness to the promised land. And Joshua led them into the promised land, and they conquered the promised land, and they were there and set up the nation of Israel. And then they had judges for a while, and then they said, we really want a king. And God said, that ain't how I set this thing up. And they said, well, we really, really, really want to be like the people around us. We want a king like the nations around us. And so God said, okay, you want it, you got it. And they got Saul, was their very first king. Saul's heart got hardened against God. David come along. David was that kind of representative, that picture of Jesus. He was the king, and then there was a covenant made with David, said there will be someone from your line on the throne forever and ever and ever. And that was a covenant that was preemptively talking about Jesus, that Jesus would come out of the line of David, both through his earthly father Joseph's line as well as his mother Mary's line, and that he would be on the throne eventually. He's on the throne of the kingdom now in heaven, but he's going to reign forever and ever and ever as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And so that saying, that covenant with David is true, that there will be someone from the line of David that will be on the throne forever and ever, and that's Jesus. And so we saw all of that, and then we walked through all the kings after David, from his son Solomon, all the way through to the last king that they had named Zedekiah. I think it was, or Zedekiah. Was it Zedekiah? I don't remember. That's been so long now. But we saw how they continually fell into idol worship, bringing in the gods of the countries around them, and they saw these prophets that would come and start talking to them. From the first one we saw come on the scene, who was the main one, that was Elijah, and then we saw all the different ones that we've read about and read their stories, from Isaiah to Joel to Amos to Obadiah. We've gone through all of these guys. And now the last time we were together before Christmas, we went through the prophet Jeremiah and his book. And so now we're at a place, if you remember, Jeremiah was that prophet who not only prophesied that there was a kingdom coming that was going to take over Israel, take over Judah, and that would send them into exile, and that was God's punishment, that was his judgment for them turning their back on God and turning to false gods and false idols and all these things. And that would, and as well as the way they were living, taking advantage of people, doing what they wanted to do and not what God was calling them to do. And Jeremiah would be another one of the prophets that prophesied this was coming, but he also was the prophet who was in the place at the time that would live through it, that would actually see it happen, that would see Babylon come into Judah to siege the city. They had it under siege for about 18 months, cut off all their supplies, to where finally they give up. They turned themselves in and just said, you know what, we surrender. Babylon took them, and then they were in what we call exile. And so that's where we left off with the book of Jeremiah, was that the children of Israel were now in exile or captivity to the Babylonians, and that's where we're at. Now, the book we're covering tonight, Lamentations. Lamentations, I told you, it's for our count that we've been counting. This is the 33rd book of the Bible that we will have covered. But if you look in your table of contents, it's the 25th book of the Bible, and it's very unique to the Old Testament because it is a book of poetry, but it's not listed in the books of poetry. You know, books of the Bible are broken down by the people who look at the genre of writing, right? So the type of books that it is, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, what are other genres that you might read, if any of you guys in here are bookworms, and all these different things. So the books in the Bible are broken down. There's books of history. There's books of prophecy. There's books of, there are the epistles in the New Testament, which are letters from the apostles to a particular church, and they're called epistles. There are books of poetry. The books of poetry include Psalms and Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. There's about 5 of those books. This book is not listed in the book of the books of poetry, although it is a book of poetry. It is a book of 5 different poems. Now, these particular poems are called laments. That's why the book is called Lamentations. So what does it mean to lament? If I'm lamenting over something, what does that mean?
Grieving.
Crying and whining.
Crying.
Pour out your
Wailing.
grieving.
All of those things, yes. Grieving, crying, crying out, calling out, being sorrowful for. It is that I am distressed, I am upset, and I am letting this out. Now, this book does not implicitly say anywhere in the book that Jeremiah is the author of this book. Nowhere in this book does it say, I, Jeremiah, wrote Lamentations, right? Or, I, Jeremiah, was over here under this tree writing this down. But Jewish history and Christian history both tell us that Jeremiah is the author, because we do know from both 2 Kings and from the book of Jeremiah that Jeremiah was in the city when Babylon besieged it. He was moved out of the city to Egypt during the time they come in and took over, and that Jeremiah was there outside of the city walls where he actually watched the city burn, and he could see the fires in the city. He could see the temple being brought down, being destroyed brick by brick, and being burnt up. And so history tells us that he was actually outside of the city in a cave where he could see the city Jerusalem and see the fires burning and see it being destroyed. Now think about this. This is your hometown. For many of us, we can actually kind of relate a little bit to this, right? How many of y'all went driving around on that first day or two of September in 2023? Where you could go drive around. How many of y'all were making it back from evacuation and coming in and having to cut trees down, cut trees out of the way to get into your homes or to get into places, and you saw the destruction, and you saw the homes that were destroyed, you saw the things that were, we literally, I can't remember if it was Idalia or Helene, but I remember we were in a house somewhere out in West Florida, I think close to Panama City, and sitting there watching these hurricane chasers who were doing videos on YouTube, and we were literally sitting in a house in safety, but watching what was happening in Perry and seeing the water, seeing the signs being thrown around, seeing the trees down, just sitting there watching, going, oh my gosh, I hope this is still there. I hope that's still there, man. I hope, And then, of course, some of y'all were hunkered down experiencing it, right? And so to some extent, you can kind of imagine what Jeremiah probably felt like back in that cave. Oh, side note here, the cave that Jeremiah was hunkered down in, most Bible scholars believe is actually the cave where it is on that hill, that rocky hill, that is also called Golgotha. Remember what happened at Golgotha? Where Jesus was put on the cross and put up for everybody to see when he was crucified. And so Jeremiah's there, and he's looking at everything that's happened. So, and then he cries out and he gives a lament, and he writes these poems. I feel like, after studying it, looking at it, I agree with the commentators that say Jeremiah most likely wrote this. Now, he was lamenting everything. Now, lamenting isn't anything new. By the time that Jeremiah would write his book, many of the authors of the Psalms had already wrote the Psalms that they would write, and it was all collected, or most of it was collected, and it was where Jeremiah could have read some of the Psalms. And there are Psalms in the book of Psalms that are considered Lamentations Psalms. Psalms chapter 10, Psalms chapter 63, 69, 74, and 79 are all considered laments. Now, a lament here, this is a biblical poem that is a form of protest. We see and hear a lot about protests in our day and time right now, right? It's all over the place. So you're protesting something that you don't like. There are many different ways to do it. And so here, Jeremiah is protesting in the form of a poem of something that he's not real happy about. Here's the thing. He's not happy about it, but he understands why it's happening. Because he understands that he was sent by God for over the course of over 20 years, or I think it was even closer to 40 years, the first half of that he was saying God is going to pour out his justice and his wrath on us if we don't do what we're supposed to do, if we don't turn around and turn from these idols and these false gods and walk in the way that he's called us to walk. If we don't do this, God is going to pour out his judgment on us. And for 20 years of his preaching time, at least, nobody listened to him. Nobody changed what they were doing. Nobody gave him credit for anything. Nobody. So he'd been calling this for a while. And then now he's probably kicked back going, he's not sitting back like Jonah did saying, all right, God, go ahead and get them. They wouldn't listen to me. But he's crying because he's like truly hurting for what his town, his people are going through, even though he warned them and warned them and warned them and warned them. All right. Y'all with me so far? It's just riveting stuff, right? It's just awesome. All right, so the book of Lamentations has 5 chapters. It's only 5 chapters long. I want to share with you a couple of little interesting things in it before we actually start reading it, because this is actually pretty cool. It's 5 chapters long. Somebody open to chapter 1 real quick and see how many verses there are in chapter 1. 22. Somebody go to chapter 2. How many verses are in chapter 2?
22.
All right, somebody go to chapter 3. How many verses are in chapter 3?
Yes, 22.
All right, how many verses are in chapter 4? And how many verses in chapter 5? 22. Okay. All right. Now remember, when the Bible was written, there were no chapters and there were no verses, right? Okay. So what Jeremiah did is he made an acrostic. Anybody remember what an acrostic is? I have one on the badge of my hospital badge at work.
You take a word. And you put the first.
Tara, can I pick on you? You're my only coworker that's in here tonight. You remember what it says on the back of our
Okay,
thing?
I got you. Okay.
You remember what does it say? They used to say I care, and there's a couple of those. So it's one of those things where you have a word, or you have letters, and each letter stands for a different word, right? That's what an acrostic is.
Grace.
I keep thinking of pass, and that's not on our badge, but pass is like that's what you do with the fire extinguisher, right? You pull the pin, you aim, you squeeze, you sweep, right? That's pass. All right. So the Jewish alphabet. Anybody take a wild guess? How many letters are in the Jewish alphabet?
22.
22. So what Jeremiah did when he started writing this lament, he started each section that he would write with a different letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Now, I didn't go deep into this study because I'm sorry, I just didn't have time, so I didn't write down what all those Hebrew letters were. I just made notes of this. So chapter 1, the Greek letter, the Hebrew word, the Hebrew letter for A, Jeremiah started his sentence with that. And it's not A, it's what we would say is A because it's the first letter. But the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And he starts with that. And then chapter 2, he does the same thing. And then chapter 3 is so awesome that he does 3 verses, or he does 3 sections for each of the letter. And that's why the third chapter has 66 verses instead of 22. And then chapter 4, he does the same thing. And then he gets to chapter 5, and he throws all that out the window, and he doesn't do it again in chapter 5. But yet it's still, are y'all hot? Everybody good? Okay.
Feels good to me.
I see people fanning back there, so face cheeks are red. So. And so by the time we get to the 5th chapter, he throws all that out the window, and he doesn't actually go by that again for the fifth lament. Each chapter is a different lament. Okay, everybody good with that? Y'all don't find that interesting?
Yes.
That's like, dude, how would you even think of doing that? And like, he must have been really bored sitting in that cave, like really upset and really bored at the same time. Like, I'm so upset, but I'm going to take my emotions out by taking each letter of my alphabet and starting my sentence with that. Yeah. And just getting his emotions out, right? So, now, Jeremiah is called the weeping prophet. And so, my name is Jeremy, not Jeremiah. I'm saying I don't weep, so I don't know what y'all talking about. I just flat out cry. Ain't no weeping, I just cry. He was not the first youth pastor, but he was, God gave him a lot of these crazy illustrations to prove his point throughout his book. And that's why I said he was like the inspiration for the very first youth pastor ever. So I'm going to go through a little bit of, tonight, I'm just going to go through a little bit of just condensing each lament and what he's talking about. We'll pick a few verses, read a few verses out of each one, and then I'm going to close with something. When we go back to the 3rd chapter, because it's the longest, and we're going to close in that. All right, everybody good? Y'all ready? Okay, all right. Lamentations 1. Lamentations 1. Look at skip all the way down to verse 12. Read a couple verses there. He says, Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Behold and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which has been brought on me, which the Lord has inflicted in the day of his fierce anger. From above he has sent fire into my bones, and it overpowered them. He has spread a net for my feet, and turned me back. He has made me desolate and faint all the day. The yoke of my transgressions was bound. They were woven together by his hand, and thrust upon my neck. He made my strength fail. The Lord delivered me into the hands of those whom I am not able to withstand. The Lord has trampled underfoot all my mighty men in my midst. He has called an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord trampled as in a winepress, the virgin daughter of Judah. Now here he jumps in and he says all these things that's going on, and then he starts kind of giving some of the onus of that on to God himself. And he's right, because God is the one who has poured out this judgment. Now, chapter 1 focuses on grief and shame of a figure that Jeremiah calls Lady Zion. And he does this, he gives the city of Jerusalem this personification as though it was a widow, and he also refers to it as the daughter of Zion. He says that she sits alone, bereaved of her loved ones, devastated and with no one to comfort her. When Lady Zion speaks, she calls on the Lord to notice her fate. It's a powerful, powerful metaphor with imagery that the poet shows that this city's destruction has brought a new level of not just the physical destruction, but psychological trauma on the Israelites. And it can only be expressed as a funeral, as though they're mourning the death of a loved one. So this first chapter is like, is this just unreal mourning and grief over the city of Jerusalem. Now, turn to chapter 2. Chapter 2, we're going to read a few of the first verses of chapter 2. The Bible says this: How the Lord has covered the daughter, we're going to read the first 8 verses there, Jared. How the Lord has covered the daughter of Zion with a cloud in his anger. He cast down from heaven to the earth the beauty of Israel, and did not remember his footstool in the day of his anger. The Lord has swallowed up and has not pitied all the dwelling places of Jacob. He has thrown down in his wrath the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. He has brought them down to the ground. He has profaned the kingdom and its princes. He has cut off in fierce anger every horn of Israel. He has, remember, horns in pictures of animals in the Old Testament, or talking about a nation. Horns represent like power of that nation. He has cut off in his fierce anger every horn of Israel. He has drawn back his right hand from before the enemy. He has blazed against Jacob like a flaming fire, devouring all around. Standing like an enemy, he has bent his bow with his right hand. Like an adversary, he has slain all who were pleasing to his eye. On the tent of the daughter of Zion, he has poured out his fury like fire. The Lord was like an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all her palaces. He has destroyed her strongholds, and has increased mourning and lamentation in the daughter of Judah. He has done violence to his tabernacle, as it were a garden. He has destroyed his place of assembly. The Lord has caused the appointed feasts of the Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion. In his burning indignation, he has spurned the king and the priest. The Lord has spurned his altar. He has abandoned his sanctuary. He has given up the walls of her palaces into the hand of the enemy. They have made a noise in the house of the Lord as on the day of a set feast. The Lord has purposed to destroy the wall of the daughter of Zion. He has stretched out a line. He has not withdrawn his hand from destroying. Therefore he has caused the rampart and the wall to lament. They languish together. Then he goes on talking about the different things as far as the state of the city. Now, in chapter 2, he's focusing on the actual fall of Jerusalem and how it's been a consequence that has been brought by God's wrath. It says it's important to remember that in the Bible, God's wrath is not spontaneous, volatile anger. The biblical poets and prophets use this word to talk about God's justice. So in the Old Testament, when we hear God's wrath, we automatically go back to that feeling of, God is this angry old man with a big white beard and long white hair and just fire flaming from his eyes, sitting on a cloud, holding a lightning bolt, ready for us to just mess up so he can zip that lightning bolt down there and just take us out. That's God's wrath. But in the Old Testament, when the prophets would talk about God's wrath, he's not talking about God's hating something or wanting to destroy something just for the sake of destroying it, or even just for the sake of them messing up. But it is judgment that is poured out to combat or to go against the evil that has been done in the land. And so God's wrath here, God's judgment, is being done, but it is being poured out by God, but it's being poured out through the Babylonians. Many of the prophets, the Old Testament prophets, if you remember, they had such a hard time with the fact that God was saying, listen, the Babylonians, or the other name for them was the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans are going to come. The Babylonians are going to come. And the prophets are like, God, why would you let these people come and do this? They're worse. They're as bad or worse than what we're doing. And yet God is like, listen, I know. If y'all remember, in Jerusalem, or in Jeremiah, when we were in the book of Jeremiah, and it took us 3 weeks to get through Jeremiah, so you may not remember. But in that book, Jeremiah was talking about that, and God's response was, I got the Babylonians. They're going to get what's coming to them too, but I'm going to use them as a tool to do what I need to do to get you guys back where you need to be. And we know, because we've already heard it in 2 Chronicles, and we've already seen it because we know the history of the Israelites. But they would be in captivity to the Babylonians for 70 years. It'd be 70 years before they were freed. So Lamentations chapter 2, we see that, and then we see that God is using them to pour out this. Skip down to verse 17. Verse 17 says, "The Lord has done what he purposed. He has fulfilled his word, which he commanded in days of old. He has thrown down and has not pitied, and he has caused an enemy to rejoice over you. He has exalted the horn," remember that's the strength, "of your adversaries." And so here we see that once again, that God is the one who has done this, but he is just in doing this because he is pouring out his just judgment. Now let's go on to chapter 3. Lamentations chapter 3. And here we see some hope. We're going to see some hope. Chapter 3 breaks the design pattern by having 3 verses per letter. We talked about that, making it the longest poem in the book. It's the voice of a lonely, suffering man who speaks as a representative of the entire people of Israel. And the commentator I was getting this from said, what's interesting in that this chapter is full of language that's also drawn from other parts of the Old Testament, including Job. We see parts of Job chapter 3, Jeremiah using those words, Psalms 22 and Psalm 69, and even some of the suffering servant that we read about in Isaiah chapter 53. But even with all of those things, he still gives some hope. And I'm going to take a little bit of time when we're done going through all 5 and come back to chapter 3 and talk about that in just a minute. So let's go on to chapter 4, Lamentations chapter 4. Lamentations chapter 4, he's back into the one verse per letter, going through his lament here. And here he gives a vivid and disturbing depiction of the 2-year siege. Remember I told you that the Babylonians, so as it got close to the time when Babylon was going to take over Jerusalem, Jeremiah was going and he's telling everybody, listen, God has already said that the Babylonians are coming in, they're going to take over the land, right? God's already said it. So what we need to do is just go on and let them and go on into this. This is what God is saying to do. And the leaders were like, this dude's crazy. We can handle it. We can handle this. We can fight against the Babylon, and we can go around to all of our friends and get them to help us. We can go to Moab, we can go to Edom, we can go to Egypt, we can go to all these places and make these alliances with these people to help us fight against Babylon. And the whole time, even from way before Jeremiah's time, God had said, listen, don't go to all these other people. Come to me. Repent of your sin. Turn away from the things that you're doing that's evil. Come back to me, and I will set your feet where it need to be. I will help you do what you need to do. Quit going to all the other stuff. Quit going to your friends. Quit going. Man, how much is that like us right now? How much, when things start going bad in our life, do we go to our bank account and try to pay for something to get out of it? How often do we go to, if you've ever struggled with something, with any kind of an addiction, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be a sex addiction, whether it be whatever, when you get stressed, when things get out of your control, those are those things that your body is telling you, I need to go back to those things because that's going to help me in this situation. That's exactly what the children of Israel were doing. They had gone to these other people in years past, and God would bring a prophet about and would try to go in and tell them all this stuff. And God has told them, listen, don't run to these other places, these other things. When you need something, come to me. And they wouldn't do it. And here again, they find themselves in the same place. And so finally, Jeremiah was like, listen, just go to the... And so everybody was like, don't listen to this Jeremiah. Matter of fact, there were false prophets who were going around and telling all the people of Israel not to listen to Jeremiah, saying that he was a false prophet when they were actually false prophets, and they were getting paid by the government to tell people everything's going to be all right. Our government has a plan. Our government's going to take care of you. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. And so this is what was going on. They were literally saying, hey, just roll with what the government's doing because they got our back. And Jeremiah's like, that ain't what God is saying. I don't know if that's what you're listening to, but that ain't what God is saying at all. And so during this time, the way that the Babylonians finally took Jerusalem is they did a siege. All right, y'all remember that from studying like world history and that sort of stuff? So they came, they encamped around Jerusalem. They cut off all of their supplies. They cut off their routes of getting food in there. So now it's a stalemate, right? They can't get in. They're killing anybody that comes out or taking them hostage, so people can't come out of the city. So it's just a stalemate. One of the kings, I don't know if y'all remember this or not, one of the kings built trenches for water from a river to come under the gates and come into Jerusalem. So they had fresh running water, but once their food ran out, their food ran out. And that's how they eventually gave in, and Babylon was able to take Jerusalem. Now, if you're in chapter 4, look at verse 10 of chapter 4. The hands of the compassionate women have cooked their own children. They became food for them in the destruction of the daughter of my people. Jeremiah is telling the story here of that this chapter 4, this lamentation is about the time, the 18-month period in which the Babylonians had sieged the city of Jerusalem. And Jeremiah is saying, listen, it got so bad during that time before we just gave up and surrendered that even the women, because they had no food, cooked and ate their own children. Now, we're not given any context to this by Jeremiah. We don't know if these were children who died of starvation. And then they said, any of y'all remember, what was the name of that movie? Was it called Alive? It was about the Donner Party, or was it the Donner Party, or was it about the soccer team that crashed? It was the soccer team that crashed in the. I learned one thing from that movie. I probably shouldn't share it with you.
Don't watch it.
Yeah, don't watch it. No, if I die and you're starving, according to that movie, cut the meat out of your buttocks. That's the best place to get the meat from. It's just a piece of slice. That's really disgusting. I apologize. We went in a really bad place really quick. But that's, yeah, everybody in the back shooting my rabbits. But that's how bad things were, that they were resorting to cannibalism to survive, to try to wait out the Babylonians, and it didn't end up working.
Just
all right.
don't fly with your friends, and then you don't have to eat them.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Chapter 5. Go to chapter 5. This one doesn't follow the pattern. Chapter 5 says the final poem breaks the pattern of the acrostic. It's the same length as the others. It's 22 lines. It says it's like the poet can't hold together anymore and his grief has exploded back into chaos. The poem is a long communal prayer for God's mercy. Israel begs God to ignore their pain, not to ignore their pain or abandon them. The poem also offers a long list of all the different kinds of people who were devastated by Jerusalem's fall and asks God not to forget them. We see how these laments, these poems of lament, can be written on behalf of others in this as well. So we see this thing. Skip down to chapter 19. We'll read through the end. It says, "You, O Lord, remain forever, your throne from generation to generation. Why do you forget us forever and forsake us for so long a time? Turn us back to you, O Lord, and we will be restored. Renew our days of old, unless you have utterly rejected us and are very angry with us." Now it's sad to me that this is how the book ends, because it would have been much better to have ended in chapter 3. Chapter 3, Jeremiah really sees some pretty awesome things. So chapter 3, go back now with me to chapter 3. And we're going to read a few verses here. And the beginning of chapter 3, we'll read about the first 9 verses first. Jeremiah says, "I am the man who has seen affliction by the rod of his wrath. He has led me and made me walk in darkness and not in light. Surely he has turned his hand against me time and time again throughout the day. He has aged my flesh and my skin and broken my bones. He has besieged me and surrounded me with bitterness and woe. He has set me in dark places like the dead of long ago. He has hedged me in so I cannot get out. He has made my chain heavy. Even when I cry and shout, he shuts out my prayer. He has blocked my ways with hewn stone. He has made my paths crooked. And then in verse 17, he says, you have moved my soul far from peace. I have forgotten prosperity. Jeremiah says, listen, all these things I've seen and done, all these things Jerusalem has been through, it's like, God, I know why you had to do it. But God, it's so much. It's so hard to see. It's so hard to watch. But I want you to understand, sometimes even in very difficult times and difficult situations, we still have a choice to live with hope. We still have hope, and we have a choice to live that way. Verse 20, he says, my soul still remembers and sinks within me. But then verse 21, he says, this I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. What does he recall to his mind? Look at verse 22. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. And then he says this. I love this verse. I'm seriously thinking about getting a tattoo that shows this. I'm just telling you. The verse 23. They are new every morning. What's new every morning? His compassions, his mercies.
Amen.
They are new every morning. And then Jeremiah, the weeping prophet who is crying about what is going on and the sin of his people and everything that has happened, he says this, great is your faithfulness. Yes. Your, in my book, in my Bible, is capitalized. So when Jeremiah says, great is your faithfulness, he's not talking in third person about himself, that he's the only one that's remained faithful. He's not talking about the remnant that's going to be saved. He's not talking about anybody else but God. And he says, great is your faithfulness, even in these kind of situations, in this kind of thing. It's that word mercies in verse 22. The word mercies there, that's that same word that in many other places in the Bible is translated as loving kindness, or even in some places as love, the love of God. And that's that Hebrew word hesed. Hesed. And that is that unwavering, unfailing love and kindness that is literally God's grace and mercy. God's grace and mercy that also said this in Romans 8:32. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. This is the God who Jeremiah is saying, great is your faithfulness. Now, he continues here. Look at verse 24. He says, the Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should hope and wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. So this is what I wanted to kind of close with tonight. This is it. We're going to close. Even in the worst of situations, there's hope. Even in the worst situation, there's hope. Some of you in here I've talked to this week. There's a few of you in here we've had conversations over the last week and a half. And you have told me of being in situations where it seemed like there was no hope. And then all of a sudden God shows up and does something amazing. And creates a way where there seems to be no way. And shows you something you've never seen before. Listen, I think it's just absolutely amazing that in a book of nothing but poems of sorrow that God put on the heart of one of his prophets to write one of the greatest scriptures in the entire Bible, that we serve a God whose love, whose mercy, whose loving kindness is new every morning. Why didn't he say it's new every afternoon at 3 o'clock? Why didn't he say it's new every night at midnight? I think God was showing some imagery there. You wake up in the morning, starting a new day, the newness. Man, you get outside and walk. Any of y'all been outside in the mornings and just been outside before? Any of y'all, I talked a little bit about hunting in the message Sunday. Any of y'all steel hunters that get in the tree before daybreak, and you're sitting out there sometimes for maybe an hour or so before it gets light, and you see that light just start coming up, kind of shining through the trees. And I'm not a big hunter, I've told you all that before, but there are a few times that I've gone and sat early. This is my problem with hunting, is you got to get there early. And I have a hard time with that. And so that's the reason I've never been real good at it. Because I show up about the time the deer do and scare them off. And so it's just how it goes.
Depending on how big the buck is, most of it's a line too.
Yeah. But man, and you just see, you hear the birds start, you hear the different things moving, and you're just like, man. And just everything coming to life. And God says, listen, I do this for you every single morning. My mercy for you, for everything that happened the day before, everything you're going through, it's brand new, starting right now. I want to share this with you, and then I'm going to close. Seriously, this is it. Seriously, this is it. I'm going to share this with you. I put this in my note, and I called it a pastoral note, because I wanted to say this. I wanted you to see this. These lament poems, these poems of lamentation, that create, that 5 of them that make up an entire book of the Bible, and then many other ones that make up chapters in the book of Psalms. These are, I mentioned it earlier, these are biblical poems of protest, a form of protest. They draw everyone's attention, including God's, to the horrible things that are happening in this world, things that we say should not be tolerated. And they're also a way of expressing emotion. In some cases, these laments, these poems of lamentation, are full-blown emotional explosions, like chapter 5 in here. They give us a voice sometimes for our confusion of why things are happening like they do. But I'm going to tell you, none of these lamentations in the Bible are ever looked down upon by the authors, and I dare say they're not looked down upon by God. So what does that tell me that blesses me tonight? It tells me when I don't understand why things are happening like they're happening, when I can't get my head around why I'm not being healed, when I can't figure out why God's not allowing us to be able to make the kind of money to be able to pay our bills, when I don't understand why my kids won't listen and do the things that I've raised them to do, when I can't understand why these things are not happening, and I blow up and I lament over these things, and I say, God, why is this happening? Why are you allowing this? God, why can't things happen? God doesn't sit back and go, oh, I can't believe you would talk to me that way. Do you know who I am? Because he's got the right to do that. He's got the right to say, oh, you don't like it? Stop breathing. You're done. But yet we see over and over as people in the Bible cry out to God and say, God, why are you doing this? Why? God says, just hold on. Just hold on. He may be growing your faith. He may be stretching you. He may be preparing you for something else down the road that might even be worse. But the entire time he's going to say, I've never left you. I've never forsaken you. Didn't start then, and I'm not going to do it now. Ain't God good? He can